So we are starting our next session with John Dilgen, who is a cyber threat intelligence analyst at RelaQuest, who will be speaking about Inside the Shadows, tracking RaaS groups and evolving cyber threats. Now, I'm going to give it over to him. One request I have, just to keep in mind that we have a lot of background noise around. So when he's speaking, please do not speak amongst yourself. If you have a question, please raise your hand. I hope that's okay. Thank you. All right, over to you.
All right, thank you for the intro. As mentioned, welcome to my talk, Inside the Shadows, Tracking Ransomware as a Service Groups and Evolving Cyber Threats. My name's John Dilgen. I'm a CTI analyst at RelaQuest, and our talk is going to focus on some of the research that the RelaQuest team has done over the past year or so. So do you know that it is estimated that ransomware exposure costs organizations in the United States an estimated $124 billion per year? And this really emphasizes the threat that ransomware has, specifically to the operations of organizations. And one of the difficulties that we have in preparing for this threat is understanding and getting in front of them, understanding their tactics and the information about these groups that conduct these attacks. So our talk is going to focus on the different data collection sources we have for ransomware as a service groups. We're going to look at the data points we can collect from those data sources, and then ultimately we're going to talk about how we can operationalize that and build a proactive defense. So we'll take a look at monitoring ransomware as a service groups, dark web intelligence, what's insights we can pull from them, as well as investigation telemetry and how we build that paint a picture into a proactive defense. We'll start with monitoring ransomware as a service groups. And to start out, let's talk about the data sources. So from the dark web, we have data leak sites. If you're unfamiliar with those are the onion sites that ransomware as a service actors use to broadcast the organizations that they've compromised. They will release their stolen data on these sites, and this is one of the methods they use to extort ransomware payments out of the targeted organizations. They're also active on forums, in many cases recruiting for affiliates. We'll dive into some of that. Attack analysis pieces, whether internal or external, provide great telemetry about the TTPs as well as IOCs. Internal communication leaks from these groups give a wealth of knowledge, we'll see quite a lot. And then law enforcement notifications are usually a bit higher level, but they include TTPs across multiple attacks as well as IOCs. We're going to start by taking a look at communication leaks. Some recent examples of this include Conti, Black Basta, and Lockbit. The insights that we can draw from them would be aliases used by the group members, what TTPs or tactics, techniques, and procedures the group is using, their connections to other groups, the web activity they have, such as social media, GitHub and file sharing, as well as any forum communication. All right, so do me a favor by raise of hands, how many of you are familiar with Black Basta? All right, quite a few. It's a really well-known name. Either way, let's make sure we're all on the same page. I just want to introduce this group real quickly. So they were first observed in April of 2022. They are connected previously to Conti ransomware, a now disbanded group. Their leader was connected to Conti, as well as their ransomware shares source code related to Conti. They are a Russian-speaking group, and they have strict affiliate selection. Okay, so this is one of the unique things about Black Basta, in the sense that, as we'll see, other ransomware groups are actively recruiting for affiliates. They're trying to bring people into the group. Black Basta continually does not want everyone. They want the best ransomware operators they can get, and people have proven themselves in previous campaigns. Just to give you some background context on that, the access to Black Basta's ransomware costs upwards of $1 million per year. So that is not easily accessible to everyone. And then finally, some of their notable TTPs are going to be the method of email spam bomb, which helps facilitate Teams phishing. If you're unfamiliar with the email spam bomb, it's where an end user, a targeted user, is flooded with hundreds of emails to make their inbox unusable, at which point the ransomware operator follows up on that, posing as the IT help desk through Teams phishing to get that target user to execute malicious code and or join a remote session, at which point the attacker can execute the code. In February of 2025, this group had internal chat communications leaked by a disgruntled member. And the reason they released these chat communications is because they were unhappy with the group's recent decision to start targeting Russian banks. And this group is based out of Russia, so they were worried about the potential law enforcement backlash from Russian law enforcement that might come against the group. Interesting parallel here is that Conti, the previous group that is associated with Black Basta, also had their internal chat logs released, and the internal chat logs were released because that particular person was unhappy that the group sided with Russia at the start of the Russian-Ukraine war. So very interesting reason for the leaks and kind of a converse parallel between the two groups. Anyway, from the Black Basta chat logs, we were able to get many aliases from them. Some of the more notable ones include Trump or Tramp, also known as GG or AA. This is the group's leader. They oversaw all operations and held final authority on ransomware payments. Quick caveat, you'll see Trump or Tramp used in certain reports. Understand that this has to do with the Russian translation. Tramp is how Russians say Trump. So it kind of depends on the source that you're citing. Additionally, we saw many chat communications from Trump and his affiliates constantly trying to drive a higher ransomware payment. This group would use the captured financial data to understand an organization's cash flow, to understand what ransom demand they should make against the group. And we consistently saw Trump constantly driving those numbers up against, as in that negotiation, saying, no, they can pay more, we want more money. Another member to be aware of is Tinkerer. They were a senior member who managed call centers and specialized in phishing campaigns targeting external remote services like VPNs and RDP. And then finally, Lapa. This was an administrator who was responsible for operational tasks, including the attacks on Russian banks, one of the very unhappy decisions for the rest of the group. Interestingly, as we tracked Lapa on criminal forums, they reflected the mindset of Black Basta very well. Not wanting to work with everybody, only wanted to work with the best, being very selective about who they would communicate and who they would ask to reach out to them. Some additional insights we got from the Black Basta chat logs included a defined organizational structure in sort of a parody that really mimics that of a cybersecurity organization. The defined roles included an intrusion specialist. These were some of the lowest paid members of Black Basta, and they focused on the initial access, helping facilitate that phishing. They consistently complained in their chat communications how they were unhappy with their pay. There was also managers and ransomware developers, botnet operators, infrastructure management, and even our R&D department focused on EDR or endpoint detection and response, how to break it. We also saw significant collaboration between Black Basta and other groups. For example, Quackbot and their main leader Cortez had quite an extensive communication to Trump, Black Basta's leader. Now, these communications were likely to help facilitate Black Basta's use of Quackbot rather than direct coordination in ransomware campaigns. We also saw communications with Rastafari, one of the main contributors to the Darkgate malware. And internally, the member Tinkerer we just highlighted, they also worked as an affiliate for Black Suit, aka Royal Ransomware, at the same time as working for Black Basta. And this is very important because it really showcases why defense in depth is so important. You know, oftentimes in the CTI industry, we want to focus in on a specific threat. Hey, this tactic is attributed to Scattered Spider. But understand, as we'll see, there's many tactics and affiliate movement between the groups. So take a step back. We don't want to tunnel vision on one specific thing. Another great example of that is all of the TTPs that were revealed from inside the Black Basta chat logs. They had many different use cases for whatever they were going against. For example, for reconnaissance, they were using Zoom Info to research revenue data, likely to determine if an organization was worth their time or essentially could make a payment demand that the group was interested in. They were also using Shodan for exposed ports and services, likely to understand what publicly available technologies and vulnerabilities that group had. And they were using Intelligence X to look up company and employee details. And this likely helped facilitate their phishing, as not only to deliver that email spam bomb, do you have to have that user's email address, but also the phishing will then contact them directly through Teams, phone calls, etc. For initial access, they have that method we just mentioned, the email spam bomb and Teams phishing. They also just use generic brute forcing and purchasing pre-compromised credentials from initial access brokers on the dark web. They used a variety of malware, including IceID, Picabot, and QuackBot. And for exfiltration, they used rclone, WinSCP, FileZilla, and curl. So just like the point we made in the last slide, this really showcases why defense in depth is so important, because they have a wide range of tactics that they can deploy depending on what they need. Okay, and understand that not only will they change their tactics mid-attack if they're encountering blocks against the defense, right? So they can maneuver against the organization's defense, but also, as we'll see, they'll change their TTPs across new attacks using the same or similar initial tactics. Next, let's take a look at what we can pull from dark web intelligence. So we went searching first for recreating some of the TTPs. As you'll see on the screen here, this is somebody offering email as a spam bomb, an email spam bomb as a service, and there's quite a lot of interesting insights we can pull from this. Now, it's important to understand this particular post is not directly related to Black Basta, at least we didn't see any evidence to suggest that. However, as I mentioned, the capabilities of this particular tool give us insights into what Black Basta might be using. First off, it's relatively low cost entry. For example, one email spam bomb is only $9, whereas a lifetime of access is $500. All right, so this is very low cost, and as I mentioned, those intrusion specialists are some of the most low-paid affiliates there are, so this type of tool is very accessible to them. Additionally, the low cost also suggests that this type of tool is relatively easy to make. If it were much harder to make, the cost would be much higher, at least in theory. Some other interesting insights include the capabilities of this particular tool. Says that they can send up to 100,000 emails per day. All right, so if we understand in our attack chains, we saw a few hundred emails was enough to successfully stop an end user from using their inbox and facilitate that phishing, right? So now breaking that down, with this tool, we could potentially phish a few hundred users per day. And what we saw was that at one time, at least 15 to 20 users are getting that email spam bomb that will then follow the phishing. Within the Black Basta leaked chats, there are almost 100 different links to forums, specifically to XSS and exploit. These are some of the two most prolific forums that threat actors use on the dark web. XSS recently has been taken down and remains to be coming back. But within those links, there were also two user profiles, Sebastian there and Marmalade Knight. Again, important to understand, these user profiles are not directly related to Black Basta. They were more likely shared by the leader as a form of knowledge sharing amongst the group, and in order to help the affiliates recreate the tactics that these users are talking about on their forums. However, the connection to these two profiles left a breadcrumb trail that we were able to follow, and we were able to identify two more users on forums that we assessed with medium to high confidence were likely members of Black Basta's initial access group. And we assessed this based off of their connections to those previous profiles and the tactics we see them talking about. Important to understand here, the aliases here have been obfuscated. They're not one-to-one with what you'll find on the forum, and this is to help protect some of our operational security and tradecraft, but essentially the main premise of the account has been kept intact. So the first one we'll talk about is IT workers. Very interestingly, their alias is similar to how the phishing technique is masquerading. They're both masquerading as IT help desk workers. Additionally, this user is seeking access to partner.microsoft.com accounts and the source code for remote access Trojans, suggesting they are initial access. And remember that partner.microsoft account, because that will come into play when we get to the investigation telemetry, as we see that being one of the main sources of phishing. Recently, they are launching attacker in the middle campaigns for token capture specific to Google accounts. So it gives us some insight into what that person is doing now. Next, we have Code Seller. This person was specializing in search engine optimization poisoning, leading to malicious sites to install malware, as well as looking for someone to help build their encryptor for the smoke loader malware, a loader or a Trojan, something used in initial access to help deliver more malicious files. So, as I mentioned, Black Basta's chat logs were released in February of 2025. And as you can see on the graph, there's a sharp decline in their activity following those releases. I should say this is the number of organizations that they named on their data leak site. And in green, you can see the volume from 2023 to 2024. In blue, you can see the volume from 2024 to 2025. And that sharp decline in February suggests that the group disbanded, and shortly after February, their data leak site is no longer available. So, if the Black Basta name is no longer being used, where did its members go? They still need to pay the bills, right? There's a few possibilities. Number one is going to be Black Suit, aka Royal. As we mentioned, Tinkerer worked as a negotiator while they were at Black Basta. However, they also had some reservations, saying that they think it's time for them to leave the group. They were unhappy with the service. A counterpoint to this is that their data leak site volume is consistently low. So there's nothing to suggest that they received an influx of affiliates and resources and were able to compromise more organizations as a result of this. Interestingly, this group is now transforming into the Chaos team, changing names and rebranding. The next possibility is Cactus Ransomware as a Service. The reason for this is because in the chat logs, Trump referenced a $500,000 payment to the Cactus group, which at minimum suggests the two are sharing tools. However, that substantial of a payment likely suggests they're collaborating on ransomware campaigns. And from the data leak site volume here, you can see for Cactus, there is a sharp increase in their number of organizations named in February, suggesting they did get the influx of affiliates or resources after Black Basta's decline. You can see they almost double their average numbers. A counterpoint to this is that since April, Cactus has not named any organizations on their data leak site and since has gone silent. Next is Blacklock or El Dorado. It's confirmed that their members speak Russian. They've had an interesting rebrand recently from El Dorado to Blacklock, which also includes black in the name, interesting parallel to Black Basta. And they're now also potentially evolving into global ransomware as a service. Again, this group's data leak site volume has remained consistent, not showcasing any potential influx of affiliates. So like the point I mentioned for the TTPs, notice how many groups here, how volatile these groups are, and how they're changing. Again, another reason why we don't want to tunnel vision on one specific threat. Now we'll talk about everyone's favorite, Lockbit, and we'll take a look at how public actions affected Lockbit's campaigns. So back in February of 2024, there was significant law enforcement action against Lockbit to take down their infrastructure. And one of the big questions that came from this is, how effective was that takedown? Could Lockbit just go spin up new infrastructure? In theory, they could. So let's look at their data leak site volume and how it was affected. Well, there's no immediate effect. There's a small change, but right there in May, you can see they're naming one of the largest volumes that any ransomware group has named. Almost 150 organizations. This is compared to the other organizations we just saw that were naming about 30 or so. So this is quite substantial volume. However, come June, their volume has consistently fallen off, suggesting that those takedowns did have a lasting effect. Now, was it that Lockbit could not spin up new infrastructure that had the effect? Or was it the fact that affiliates realized there's serious heat on the group and have moved elsewhere? That much is unclear at this time. However, the volume showcases that the group is in decline. In December of 2024, Lockbit teased the release of Lockbit 4.0. And this suggests that the group was going to try and reclaim some of that market space that they had lost. However, again, looking at their data leak site volume, they never returned to those full supreme numbers that they once had, suggesting that this was not that big of a release. Before we move on, I want to showcase some of the wording in this particular Lockbit 4.0 release, because we'll see something very similar again. So, as you can see, the way they're advertising this is, would you like a Lamborghini? Would you like a Ferrari? Would you like lots of girls? Become a pen tester billionaire in 5 minutes. So it's very salesy, it's very flashy, it's hyperbole in many sense. But with that being said, it's one method, and we'll see some examples in a couple slides that contrast with this. All right, again, by raise of hands, how many of you guys are familiar with DragonForce ransomware? All right, quite a few, but again, let's get on the same page because we're going to talk a little bit about them. So they were first observed in December of 2023. They used the cartel model, which is something that makes DragonForce unique. This allows other ransomware groups to use their own ransomware branding and still operate with DragonForce's infrastructure. Something that they're trying to do to get more affiliates without others sacrificing their name. They have two ransomware variants, Lockbit 3.0 and Conti, and they recently linked to the scattered spider attacks in the UK retailer, against UK retailers that y'all have probably seen. Another thing that makes DragonForce unique is their aggressive recruiting campaigns. So we track some of their recruiting on criminal forums, and on the left-hand side, you can see the DragonForce recruiting. One thing right away is it's very, very verbose, all right? So I actually had to cut off about 3 or 4 paragraphs here to get this to fit on the screen, but there's a lot of information that they're giving, which at minimum suggests they're putting heavy efforts into recruiting affiliates. Some interesting insights from this post is that they are offering complete automation of all workflow processes. All right, so one thing we've observed at ReliaQuest is that ransomware operators are getting consistently faster at the time from successful initial access to successful lateral movement, something we call the breakout time, and this is likely due to their use of automation. Again, an interesting parallel to cybersecurity organizations. Other interesting insights include the offer of complete software for every task, including specific technologies such as ESSI, NAS, and BDSD. Now, if you compare this to the post on the right, which is more recent for Warlock, it's very minimal. It's only saying, contact me if you want a Lamborghini, in less than a paragraph. So at minimum, there's less emphasis on the recruiting here than DragonForce has, and potentially even less capabilities of the group. For example, if you compare this to a post like Nova, who are saying that they only provide lockers and guidance, they don't provide anything else, such things like we may help with info stealers, but you're really on your own. So again, it just kind of showcases the capability of the group, potentially indicating where this group might go in the future. Something else that makes DragonForce unique is that they are aggressively defacing the data leak sites of other ransomware as a service groups. So as you can see there on the left, this is their defacement of RansomHub, and they did this in an attempt to steal RansomHub affiliates. They're using wording like, please reconsider our offer, we're waiting for everyone to join our ranks. Now, if you go down the rabbit hole of dark web here, there's some really interesting dark web drama between these two groups back and forth. Since this time, DragonForce has recanted and said that they've never done this. They didn't deface RansomHub's site, and then RansomHub has adamantly maintained their position that they have, etc. Either way, if you're unfamiliar with RansomHub, they were the #1 group in Q4 of 2024, as far as number of organizations named on their data leak site. So they were big dogs on the scene. Since this defacement, their data leak site has been down. However, they say it's coming back soon, but it has been months since this takedown. Additionally, on one of the other cyber criminal forums that's very big for recruiting, DragonForce inserted their branding, as you can see on the bottom left there. They overlaid their branding with the ramp branding to, again, likely to make a name for themselves and drive affiliates to them. And on the right-hand side here, this is the defacement against BlackLock ransomware. Again, DragonForce added their own wording. They leaked the ETC password file, and they leaked chat logs for BlackLock. So again, they're aggressively coming after these other groups. So the question is, how successful was it? Well, looking at their data leak site volume, you can see the cartel model was announced in March, and the data leak site defacements began in April. You can see a significant spike in volume, suggesting they were successful at bringing affiliates over with these campaigns. In April they almost double their average volume, and while it does drop off in May, it is consistently higher going into June and July of 2025. Now let's talk about investigation telemetry and proactive defense, tying everything together. So we analyzed incidents of email spam bombs and Teams phishing And here is the evolution of TTPs across time. So in April 2024, we saw that email spam bomb being used with Teams phishing or voice over IP phishing, phone call phishing. In October of 2024, we see Teams chats being used with QR codes and QR code-based phishing. Then in January of 2025, we see Teams messages or Teams meetings taking place where the threat actor is given control of the host. The source of the phishing is on Microsoft.com domains. These are very easy for attackers to spin up and help establish legitimacy to their social engineering because it includes that Microsoft.com and suggests that they could be a IT worker, which is the premise they are using. We also see DLL side loading being used for lateral movement as well as privilege escalation. February 2025, we see the QEMU hypervisor being used for persistence. In March 2025, we see persistence being used via type live hijacking and Telegram beaconing for C2 communications. And then in April of 2025, we see SSH tunneling as well. So notice how we have March and April of 2025. After February of 2025, when this group disbanded, their tactics live on. Now it's important to understand not every single one of these incidents was directly attributed to Black Basta, right? However, all of them were directly attributed to that email spam bomb and that initial tactic that they had. All right. So if it's not all Black Basta, who else is using it? And there were multiple articles from other researchers showcasing how both 3AM ransomware and Fin7 were also utilizing the email spam bomb tactic. So is this just another group mirroring the same tactic as before? Or is this the transfer of affiliates that we saw, right? If those initial access affiliates are getting paid very little money, they're unhappy with their current group, they're very likely to move between groups, especially after it's disbanded. We also track the source of these Teams phishing incidents. In dark blue there, you'll see the number one most common one we saw was from on Microsoft.com domains. In orange there we have legitimate domains. These are compromised legitimate tenants that are used for outbound phishing. And then the one in blue I want to draw your attention to, the light blue there, is Microsoft.com domains. Very hard to get, but really help facilitate that social engineering because your average user likely gets sales communications and tech communications from Microsoft on a regular basis. As we investigated the incidents, we noticed common elements among them, such as including help desk or IT in the username of the chats that were facilitated the phishing. As you can see the example there, this one is IT support. And the drop files, the drop malicious files, all contained wording that helped establish the premise that the threat actor was there to stop the email spam bombs, including filters and anti-spam. So how do we turn this into defense? There are a couple ways. Here are some high-level threat hunts or detections you can build. Number one would be where the log source is Microsoft Teams. The event name is chat created, and the chat name includes help desk or IT. Another one would be any of the log sources of proxy, IDS, or Windows event logs. Your event name could be a file download or a file executed, and your file name contains filter or anti-spam. Now we're going to move on to talk about Scattered Spider. This is a kill chain that ReliaQuest investigated for a customer in the manufacturing sector. If you're curious, there's a lot more TTPs than this. You can view this particular kill chain on our blog for our Scattered Spider collaboration with Ransom Hub piece. But the high-level tactics we're going to go through here has to do with everyone's favorite, the VIP impersonation. So in dark there we have the threat actor's actions, and then in blue there we have the help desk actions. This started where a call was made to the help desk. The CFO was impersonated. The help desk reset the credentials for that account, providing the threat actor access to that account. The threat actor attempted to access the account but was stopped by MFA, so they made a second call to the help desk, at which point they kindly reset the MFA on the CFO's account. The threat actor then quickly paired their own attacker-controlled device with the CFO's MFA. They did some initial reconnaissance and ultimately realized the CFO's account did not have permissions to get to the sensitive data they were looking for. So with the reconnaissance, they identified a domain admin account, made a third impersonation call to the help desk. Credentials were reset for this account. Okta and Thycotic, or the identity management tenants, were compromised. From here, credentials were dumped, data was exfiltrated, and the ransom hub encryptor was deployed. Ultimately, this came down to the help desk not following verification procedures properly, but it's important to understand that there are many ways we can defend against this. Number one is going to be implement strict help desk verification procedures, okay? So we need verification on both sides of the call, right? We need users to be able to verify that they're speaking to the help desk, as we saw Black Basta impersonate the help desk to phish the users, and we need the help desk to be able to verify that they're speaking to the users, as we saw Scattered Spider impersonate the help desk, or impersonate the users to phish the help desk. So we need verification on both sides. We then audit the help desk verification. These should be included in your red team testing, all right? Especially if your help desk is third party. As we've seen in the most recent Scattered Spider attacks in the UK, that compromise likely came from a third party help desk. You need to educate your users on Teams phishing and vishing, specifically that email spam bomb. As we've seen, education is the best defense. And now, as we look at some of these more recent attack kill chains, where we're still seeing 15 plus users get phished, almost every single one of them knows what the deal is and is not answering these calls. One organization really greatly had documentation on exactly what to do when you get that email spam bomb. Really helps stop this attack in its tracks. Finally, disable all those unauthorized remote monitoring and management tools through GPO or application control. To summarize, let's take a look at the data sources and points we can collect from them when tracking ransomware as a service groups. First off, we have communication dumps. We can pull the organizational structure, the TTPs, the group members, and their collaboration with other groups. From the dark web, we can track forum activity, data leak site volume, and data leak site defacements. And then from attack analysis pieces, both internal and external, we can see TTP evolution. We can see groups using the same tactics. We can see detection and hunting searches, or we can deliver detection and hunting searches, and ultimately provide actionable defense recommendations. Thank you everyone for joining. As I mentioned, my name is John Dilgen. If you like, you can connect with me on LinkedIn there. I'm happy to connect. And then also, if you enjoyed this talk, please check out our Shadow Talk podcast. I'm on there pretty regularly. We also have the rest of our threat research team. We deep dive threats like this all the time. All right, that's everything. I'll take questions over there on the side. Thank you again.